What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the annual roast of Trent Baalke, the AFC South divisional draft grades. I promise it's not all bad this year, Jags fans. We're going to go ahead and get started. Please do hit that like button as we head in. Make sure you're dropping those comments down below where you agree, where you disagree with my evaluations and my grades on these teams. Also, a reminder, the criteria for my grading profiles here is all in the description below. Checking how these teams aced the test this year. But let's start with the Houston Texans, going alphabetically here. So they end up with Kamari Lassiter inside the top 50 of the draft, and I actually praised them when they traded down with the Vikings, kind of navigating that situation. In hindsight, I wish I would have waited to see how this played out for them first to kind of see who they might have been targeting in that trade down. And now that the Vikings didn't trade up for McCarthy inside that top 5, it does really seem like the Texans went to the Vikings with that idea. I know they ended up flipping it for Stephon Diggs and all that, but they could have sent their own second-round pick next year. I think this is underwhelming in the sense that we had been saying this is like a really, really freaking good draft class, right? Like, we stacked it up over the last 5-6 years. We said it's the best or second best, especially compared to like last year, where it was like the 23rd pick in last year's draft was not the equivalent to the 23rd pick in this year's draft, right? I think we all agree there. So in hindsight, I kind of regret jumping the gun on praising the Texans because game theory would say, why would you trade out of a really valuable pick in a great draft when you don't know what next year's draft is going to look like? Or at least wait till the draft happens to do something like this. So in hindsight, I'm actually not a huge fan of this, and I like Kamari Lassiter. I was willing to somewhat hold my grade on him despite the poor 40 time, though it was a slight ding. There's obvious questions about the long speed and stuff. But, you know, I just so much would have rather, you know, walked out of this with a Nate Wiggins or a Cooper DeJean or any number of other great prospects that were out there in this draft, as opposed to moving down, getting Kamari Lassiter, who I saw as like a late second round type of guy. It's not something I'm going to slam the Texans for. I like Kamari Lassiter. I think he can be an adequate number 2 corner opposite of Derek Stingley. A really smart player, really quick feet. I think he could be a slot corner for them as well, which might be his best projection for this team. But it is just my opinion. Like, in hindsight, the haul that they got when they had that 23rd pick, it's just kind of like, okay. So I'm going to go B- on the Kamari Lassiter pick paired with the early trade down kind of strategy that they went with. I think it was a unique situation. I don't usually account for moves that happened before the draft, but that one is very specifically related to the draft. So I'm going to count that as a part of this grade. Texans fans, definitely let me know what you thought about this one. I think B- is about right, where it's like this could be a solid player for them, but they could have probably gotten a lot more. Granted, of course, they'll have the extra second round pick next year, which is nice. We'll see what they do with that. But I think probability-wise, Kamari Lassiter plus whatever they get with that second round pick, is that going to be better than the haul they could have gotten with that 23rd pick? I don't know. I really don't know. But I do love getting Blake Fisher at the end of the second round. I think of all the kind of second round tackles that went, he was my favorite straight up, and they get him at the very back end of the second round. I don't get why more people weren't talking about him. A true junior out of Notre Dame who's a solid athlete, guard tackle flexibility, good play strength, good targeting system on the move, on pull blocks and wide zone. I think he's a potential upgrade to Titus Howard, maybe as early as year 1. But also could play guard. I definitely felt like the Texans were missing one more piece on that offensive line. They have a bunch of different assets, a lot of unproven assets. Really a big fan of Blake Fisher. I was close to giving this a certified steal, but I didn't quite go that far just because this is around the range I had him going. But was happy to see him go in the second round. Was a guy I kind of pounded the table for. I was like, why do people have him as a 3rd, 4th round talent? Like, he's a much better prospect than that. Then we had Kalen Bullock in the 3rd round. Okay, right on the early cusp of where I would have thought about Kalen Bullock. Super raw but rangy playmaking free safety. I see what they like in him. they want, if they're going to go cover 3 and cover 1, they want a guy that can patrol the middle of the field and have that range, play in center field, and they don't really have that in their current room, so I get that, and I do think it's a good spot where you do have Jalen Petrie, you do have Jimmy Ward. They're going to be your starting safeties, at least for now. But if you want to go to 3 safety packages with those 2 guys and their flexibility, with just Kalen Bullock, year 1, all you have to worry about is really coverage snaps, dime package, free safety work. I think it's a good starting point for a really young player that, I mean, I won't sugarcoat it. His run defense was really pathetic. It was kind of, the USC Lincoln Riley regime was a Big 12 defense as far as I'm concerned. And it was kind of everything we've seen from a lot of Big 12 safeties where they just are so disinterested in the run, late to get to the ball, missing tackles, taking bad pursuit angles. They got to fix that. Now, he's in a good situation to fix that if they can. He can be a starting free safety down the road, but he was an exciting yet flawed prospect. Middle of the 3rd round is a solid to good pick for me on him. So day 2 was, all right, kind of a solid B day 2 for me, factoring in that trade down. And then day 3, again, was very solid. I didn't think they, stole any incredible talents here or anything like that. Pretty safe day 3 of the draft. Cade Stover goes around later than I had him going. He's a super high floor, I think potential starting tight end in the league. Eerily familiar to Dalton Schultz, so he's going to be your tight end 2 if you want to go 12 personnel. He's kind of that classic high floor possession tight end, just kind of good at the position, knows what he's doing, but not going to blow you away with his speed or even his run blocking. Again, very Dalton Schultzy. They just extended Dalton Schultz, but you project 3-4 years down the road, I think you can just kind of keep going with Cade Stover. He's just a good player at this point. It's not that he fills a need for them or anything, but definitely going best player available there. I think that's a great pick. One of my favorite values that they got in this draft. Then they go Jamal Hill out of Oregon. He kind of played that dime linebacker, sort of hybrid style linebacker. I see what the Texans like in him as kind of a backup and another dart throw in the kind of Christian Harris mold where he's super undersized, but he's fast and has to learn the position. I trust D'Amico Ryan's eye for this specific position. So I think it's a solid pick. Nothing wrong with the value. I didn't end up writing him up, but I was familiar with him. Then Jawar Jordan. This was the one pick they made on day 3 where I was like, I definitely wouldn't have drafted him here. A lot of better running backs available, in my opinion. He's got good vision. He kind of has that Devin Singletary. That's a very common pro comp for guys that are not big, are not fast, have no physical tools, but get the job done. He kind of has that, but he's not as good as Devin Singletary. He doesn't have the power profile. I think there were other backs as well, maybe like a Frank Gore Jr., among some other names that if you had to go with the completely unathletic guy that produced in college, I just thought there were other guys I would have gone with. He valiantly outproduced Isaac Guerendo at Louisville. We often say, I think this guy's got better football ahead of him in the pros. Jawar Jordan's a guy that I think his best football is behind him. So, I don't know. I wasn't a fan of that pick. Not the end of the world as a late 6th round pick. Solomon Byrd as well. I mean, okay, if they see something in him and if they felt like his abysmal workout where he ran below a 5 flat 40 time at 265 pounds was a complete non-impact for that USC defensive line, I certainly didn't see it. I didn't do a full eval on him. He was kind of in the corner of my eye, but once he had that abysmal workout, I was like, yeah, I probably wouldn't draft the guy, but okay, we're in the mid to late 7th round. I mean, whatever. Marcus Harris, I liked this pick. I thought this was good value. Athletic, quick twitch, interior defensive lineman, definitely fits the mold of kind of the style of defensive tackle that they like, obviously. They've had a boatload of types with this kind of size and athletic profile. Has a good finesse tool belt. I could see him being a good backup in the league, especially for this defensive line. So I did like that pick. And then Ladarius Henderson, 5th year kind of project tackle out of Michigan. I was very underwhelmed by his tape. Just expect more, technically speaking, coming from that coaching staff. So, the traits are there. We'll see, I guess. Do love bringing in both the Janky or Yankee. You guys will have to let me know how you pronounce those last names if you know. But these guys, I didn't get around to writing them up, but I definitely enjoyed watching them when I was getting through those offensive linemen at South Dakota State. I just ran out of time to put on profiles for these guys, but they definitely caught my eye. Were two of my favorite players that I didn't get around to writing up. So fun duo that were really dynamic at South Dakota State. Kind of good size, tough type of wide receivers. So, will be fun to monitor if they make the team, either of them. It'll be a fun camp battle to see these guys duke it out. So I like the combo pickup of those two guys as UDFA steals. Not the most exciting draft to kick off this video, not going to lie. I think they kind of hit this one down the fairway. Bunch of solid picks. Nobody that I'm like, yeah, they got a superstar here, which is kind of where that trading out of the first round is a little underwhelming for me because I thought there were superstar players that they could have gotten on the roster here. But you might walk out of here with 2-3 starters, some role players. It's a solid draft after they traded out of the first round. I'm going to go with a B on the Houston Texans. But then we have the Indianapolis Colts taking Laiatu Latu with the 15th pick in the draft. Kind of a bang the drum, ring the bell moment for me. 2.5 months ago, I put him as edge one, when at the time it was much more common to see Dallas Turner, even Jared Verse. And I was like, look, Laiatu Latu's probably the best pass rusher in the draft. And then Chris Ballard, the video drops of him laughing his ass off at the league. We got the best effing pass rusher in the draft. And I'm like, yeah, you did, Chris. Tell the people. So I am going to go with a S grade, a certified steal. This is one of my favorite picks in the first round. That edge group for Indianapolis is fine, but it's been so underwhelming. Kwity Paye has settled in as a solid number 2. I like Samson Ebukam, but he's getting up there in age and is probably a number 2. Same can be said about the variety of other investments they've made at this group. They have yet to find that alpha, that number 1 guy. I think Latu can be that. I think his upside has been understated in this draft. An incredible pass rushing tool belt. The one knock on him is he doesn't rush with a ton of power, but you do see flashes of that bull rush. And I think because he was literally the most productive, dynamic pass rusher in college football over the last 2 years, he had back-to-back years blowing away all of college football in terms of competition with the pass rush win rate tracked by PFF. He was miles ahead of the competition back-to-back years. So if you're producing and just working dudes consistently, you don't have to go to the bull rush. But I did see the flashes in there. He is 265 pounds. He's got a good first step. I mean, I think he can do that more at the next level. He's a great run defender. He totally fits what they're looking for. I saw a lot of TJ Watt in his game. So I just love that he was the first edge rusher off the board, the first defensive player off the board. I certainly had him graded up into that territory. So I love this for the Indianapolis Colts. It's been a missing piece. We've been hard on Chris Ballard for years for finding good players, but not finding good players at those premium positions, edge, corner, wide receiver. And Laiatu Latu, I think, can really be that. Now, there's the whole medical situation. If they're comfortable with them at 15, I'm comfortable with him at 15. He's hasn't missed a game in 2 years since he was, medically dismissed. So huge fan of this pick to get really, their choice of the best defensive player in their opinion in the draft, and very much close. Like I had Quinyon Mitchell, I think, a touch above Latu, but in terms of pass rusher, I had Latu and Byron Murphy tied for best defensive player in the draft. So to get that at 15, I think that's phenomenal. I'm going to go with a steal on that one. But then you go to Adonai Mitchell at the end of the second round. I'm giving this a certified steal as well. He was my wide receiver 6 with a late first, early second round grade. I think worse wide receivers went ahead of him. Certainly lower upside wide receivers went ahead of him. He's going to be a really fascinating player to monitor. I think in terms of the landing spot, it's a great fit. I really wanted to see them get one of these top wide receiver prospects to kind of plug in as that vertical threat that's been missing in this offense. He's going to compete with Alec Pierce. I like that. I think those guys come into next year kind of even playing fields, and you say, okay, who's going to win this job as the third wide receiver in this offense? I really like that competition. Now, I'm not going to say I don't understand why he fell. I think there's a very nuanced, interesting conversation to be had about Adonai Mitchell. I really hate when people say this guy took plays off, right? Like, I think that gets overused a lot. But with Adonai Mitchell, he really did. Like, it was very noticeable going through 3 or 4 of his games. Like, if he wasn't getting the ball, he half-assed his routes. He just did. It's what showed up on film. I think a lot of people were afraid of that. And when he was asked about that, because other people noticed it, he said, yeah, I do that on purpose. I'm trying to save energy for late in the game. And that's not a very good answer. I don't really like that answer, personally. So it's like, he's doing that on purpose. Okay. And then there's this whole diabetes situation. I'm really not trying to bring this up. People like to avoid any sort of controversial subject. I don't think it's that controversial. I think it's very real. I know people that have dealt with diabetes that if they're not getting the right, and I'm not a doctor, so forgive me if I'm off here, but if they're not getting the right diet or insulin levels, which I can imagine a college program might not be doing the best job of being sensitive to this type of stuff. We're literally 3 years removed from the NCAA, like, not providing meals for their players, right? So, it's very realistic to say that Texas maybe wasn't on top of this with Mitchell. Even Georgia maybe wasn't on top of this with Mitchell. And if he wasn't getting the right medical treatment for his condition, it is with diabetes, like, you are going to turn into a different person that can be more difficult for other people to deal with when your personality changes like that. So I think it's a real thing. So are the Colts aware of that? Are they going to make sure, he's getting the right treatment for that, whether that's nutrition or insulin, whatever it may be? I don't think it's a knock on him. I really don't. If anything, that might explain some of the lack of effort on certain plays or some of those questions. I definitely don't think it's a character thing. So I just find it fascinating. I wanted to bring it up. I don't think it's something we need to, yell at each other about. It's just going to be something to kind of monitor and be aware of. And is that a legit report? It all adds up to me. So anyway, I love this pick. I am really excited to see him in here. What I want to see is an NFL team be able to really tap into that 4.36 speed that he ran, because Texas very rarely, if ever, was able to maximize that. I think they did him a disservice not throwing him those deep targets all the time. It was a lot of, mid to deep range, like working the sideline stuff, but very rarely did you see them say, okay, Adonai, go burn past the corner, run as fast as you can. We're going to tap into Quinn Ewers' arm strength and throw you a deep ball. I felt like they really did a poor job attacking that, which I'm curious if there's more juice in the tank there with Adonai Mitchell. So very fun pick. Love how he fits with this Colts offense. I don't know that he's a slam dunk superstar, but the potential certainly says it's there. We need a little bit more nuance here with this third pick. This is the first time, I think, since I've been doing this, where a player was drafted on day 2 of the draft that I didn't get to. So, I'll hold my hand up. I should have gotten to him, but here's the reasoning why. Number one, he was very low on the consensus board. So I did about 50 offensive linemen this year. He was getting close to the names that I wanted to get to before the draft, but certainly not a guy that got a lot of hype, or anybody was like, you got to go watch Matt Goncalves, or Goncalves, I think is how that's said. But he played 3 games in his final year. He was a, mid-range prospect that missed the final year, didn't test. So, I just assumed this was more of a 6th, 7th round guy. Clearly not. The Colts like him. Now, what I will say is it does seem the very few people that did go and watch this film did like him. So I have to have some nuance here and just be like, look, I don't know on this one. I could have ended up watching him and ended up liking him. So I know it is what it is. It is what it is, man. I did 262 players this year. He was not one of them. So I'm going to throw a B/question mark on this one. I don't think there were any must draft tackles available at this point. There were some guys I liked, like Foster and Christian Jones out of Texas, for example. But, I'm just going to have to trust the Colts on this one, and will be another interesting player to see kind of how this follows through for them. Then you get to day 3. Nothing stands out as amazing to me. There's a couple picks I like more than others, but there wasn't anything that was like egregious on day 3 either. They take Tanner Bortolini out of Wisconsin, a total Colts type, right? Like uber athlete. You kind of getting back to the RAS gods, which I guess Mitchell is a little bit of that in the second round. But yeah, Bortolini killed it in their own stadium at the Combine. I like Tanner Bortolini. He's a sawed-off shotgun of a center with a great first step. I think in the 4th round, there's nothing wrong with that. The only reason I have good pick on this and not great pick is I actually thought there were better centers available that were falling in this draft. Guys like Cedric Van Pran, Hunter Norzad, I thought were slightly better. But you're splitting hairs there. I think it's a good pick. I think he has the upside to eventually replace Kelly as the long-term center there. But I did have some questions with him in terms of pass protection that I didn't necessarily have with some of those other centers. So I think it's a good pick there, but there were a couple of the guys that I liked better. Then Anthony Gold at the top of the 5th. They definitely needed some more depth at wide receiver still. Anthony Gold is a really good backup to Josh Downs. If you don't want Downs doing kick return, punt return duties so that he doesn't get hurt, makes sense to bring in Gold. He's a polished, undersized wide receiver with good speed. I thought this was very solid value for him. I didn't see like a great prospect or anything like that, but a good enough pick there on the 5th round. And then with the 16th pick, I like this one as a fit schematically. Jalen Carley's out of Missouri. Massive safety, like 6'2", 230 pounds, the type of like Madden create a player / built in a German lab type of raw athlete. Lack of production, probably misutilized at Missouri, played a lot of free safety and stuff. They're going to, I think, move him to linebacker. They have this role in Gus Bradley's defense. Ronnie Harrison has come in from Cleveland via Jacksonville as that safety converted linebacker to be their kind of really the Cam Chancellor role in that defense. So I think Carley's has a lot of potential in that role with a really good mentor ahead of him that's kind of taken that path. Someone I'm definitely keeping my eye on that could be like a really impactful kind of dime safety, dime linebacker type. So I thought it was a good pick. And then they go with a complete opposite style of safety in Jalen Simpson, who's much more of just a cover safety. I'm really worried about his run defense. He's tiny. I think he's a passing downs safety only, really. Maybe could be a true single high free safety someday, which this team does love their cover 3. So he's got the range, he's got the speed, but is he really going to come down and be a consistent last line of defense as a tackler? I don't know. He's like 178 pounds. So to me, this screams like useful dime coverage player and a special teamer. Thought the value checked out. Then they go Micah Abraham. Didn't get to him. Looks like a slot profile, potential long-term replacement to Kenny Moore Jr. And then they go with kind of the hybrid D-end out of Oklahoma, Jonah Loalu. This is their type, right? They have a million of these different types of guys, from Taven Bryan to Odenigbo, going back to Danico Autry. He fills the profile that they're looking for there. I definitely don't think he's the caliber there. I would imagine he'll end up on the practice squad in year 1 because they still have a bunch of those dudes on the roster right now. Another one would be Adebawore, who they drafted last year. And then in terms of UDFAs, I didn't really see anybody on their list that stood out to me. But this was a tough draft for me to grade because of the kind of nuance behind the Gun Calvez situation. I just didn't get to him, but I'm not gonna rule out the fact that they're right about that. I wish I could come with more takes on that draft, but I just, as you guys know, I'm not going to just talk out of my ass, and I'm very real on this channel, so it's a tough one. I've never had a day 2 pick where I didn't get to a guy. I got to up my number of players I watch again next year. I thought 262 would be enough. But I guess not. So it was tough. I am going to go with an A on this one because I love those first 2 picks. I didn't see anything wrong with day 3, even if nothing really popped and helped the overall grade. But I think they nailed their first 2 picks. And if those guys turn into the 2 players that they're hoping for, and maybe you get like a Carley's or Bortolini or Gon Calvez to turn into a starter for them, you're going to look back on this as a really good draft. So Loving this one for the Colts. Let's go to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who I said at the top of the show, this is the annual roast of Trent Baalke. This is not a front office I'd be able to work for. They would fire me because every year they have multiple picks where I'm like, man, I did not see that player that way. I mean, last year it was Brenton Strange in the second round. I was like, I thought he was a 5th or a 6th round tight end. You took him in the second round. The Trayvon Walker pick, I was like, what are we doing here? So it's not all bad for the Jags, but it was another year where I'm like, gosh, I just do not see eye to eye with Trent Baalke. I have been on the record saying he's the worst general manager in the league. And at this point, I'm not going to apologize to those Trent Baalke apologists. If you think I'm wrong, you think I'm an idiot for that, fair game, right? It's a strong take. But I know a lot of Jags fans, I know probably 7 out of 10 Jags fans sympathize with me on that point. And this was another draft where I'm like, why are we letting this guy still run the show? His process, I don't think works. So the best thing they did, for what it's worth, did happen in the first round. And I think this was one of the best first round moves overall for any team. I'm going to give this an S in terms of the trade down, where they picked up a 3rd and a 4th round pick that Trent Baalke can waste next year on to move down and still get the guy I think they were going to take at 17 in Brian Thomas Jr. Love how he fits here. I think you look at what happened with Trevor Lawrence last year. It is freaking so annoying, the people that are hating on Trevor Lawrence for what happened last year. Did he have his best year? Did he have the most exciting year? No. But the amount of deep balls that were just out of reach because either Calvin Ridley couldn't get his foot down, or, you're throwing to Zay Jones, who doesn't have that extra half step, whatever it might be. The amount of near completions that were like good looks from Trevor Lawrence was bizarre. And now you go with potentially the best deep ball target in the draft, or at least like legit 40 plus yards, like you're screaming open, and you're putting them with, in my opinion, one of the best deep ball throwers in the league. I understand the accuracy metrics and all that stuff might not be great on Trevor Lawrence, but a lot of people don't understand. Like, I've charted the accuracy for Pro Football Focus. A lot of those metrics that people are talking about, it has a lot more to do with separation and the receiver adjusting to the ball oftentimes than it does about the quarterback's accuracy. So I think that's going to take a dramatic change, getting a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. that I think made Jaden Daniels look a lot better at LSU. So you've got that. Now, like, he's going to have to win the job. They signed Gabe Davis to do this. There's some redundancy there. It's not the end of the world. Questionable allocation of resources at best. But still, to get those extra picks, to move down and get, in my opinion, the 4th wide receiver in this draft, who has really been a missing piece for this offense. I love their short to intermediate options, right? You've got Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, ETN out of the backfield. Like, they are covered in the short to intermediate, but they needed this deep threat. I love this pick for the Jags. Now, after that, really not a great draft, in my opinion. There's one pick I like in the 4th round. We'll get to that. But they go Mason Smith, a good round plus earlier than I was starting to think about this project of a defensive tackle. This is the Trayvon Walker pick in the 2nd round, kind of all over again. And this is, Trent Baalke is obsessed with arm length, right? That was Mason Smith's thing, is like crazy long arms, high upside. The dude looks like Chris Jones. And even from time to time, maybe once every 4 weeks, once every blue moon, he wins with a swim move that looks like a Chris Jones swim move, right? But the pad level, the run defense, the consistency, his ability to actually get off the ball, convert his length into a power rush, which was a Trayvon Walkerism, was like, he theoretically should be able to do this way more consistently, and it's just not there. Very much in line with Mason Smith. Obviously a different position. I like him getting Eric Armstead as a mentor. I do. I think with that length profile, there's going to be some things he can teach him. And there is a world where this works out. There really is. He's a young player, hasn't played a ton of football, missed his sophomore season, celebrating for an injury, had a hard time bouncing back from that. But the lack of growth in year 3 was really a concern for me. Definitely was more of a 3rd or a 4th round gamble for me, not a top 50 pick in the draft. For me, if you want to gamble on a guy as a pass rushing interior guy, give me a Michael Hall Jr. who went 4 or 5 picks later to the Browns. Super risky pick. That's what they do. They gamble on these D-line types, and for the most part, it has not worked out for them. Not going to rule out the possibility that it happens with Mason Smith, but I certainly would have gone in a different direction, and it was early on Mason Smith. So I'm going to D on that one. Then you go Jarrian Jones at the end of the third round. Like, for him to be your answer, basically, in this draft after, you let Darius Williams go, you bring in, Ronald Darby. Like, they really needed corner in this draft. They did. For Jarrian Jones to be that guy that might have to start in that secondary, look, some people liked him. I didn't see it. And that same thing happened with Jamie Robinson last year, where a lot of people loved him. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just didn't see an NFL starter in his game. Kind of an afterthought on the Panthers already. I don't know. I kind of feel that way about Jarrian Jones. He played outside a year ago, and then he moves into the slot. He's kind of this tweener of a corner where he's not a consistent enough tackler for me to love him in the slot. He's kind of tweener size where he's just under 6 foot, 190 pounds, shorter arm length. I don't love him as an outside corner, though his best tape was probably outside. I thought in the slot, in his final year at Florida State, his reaction time and stickiness and coverage was borderline abysmal. So it was early for him. I understand the need pick here, but there was other corners I would have gone. I would have drafted this order differently. I just can't get behind this. I hope I'm wrong, but it was just really early for me on Jarrian Jones. I saw him as a special teamer and a good, versatile backup defensive back in the league. This is too early to take that player, in my opinion. Now, gets great with the Javon Foster pick in the 4th round. I definitely thought he should have gone ahead of maybe 5 or 6 other tackles that were drafted ahead of him. Love his hand usage in pass protection. Love his run blocking. He didn't test that well, but he really fires off the ball well. I mean, I think he's a potential starter in the league. I don't know that he has the traits to be like a high-end guy, but just a very useful offensive lineman. They have tackles on the roster, so it's not going to be an impact type of pick for them. But I think he could even be a guard at the next level. There's nothing about his size profile that says he couldn't be a really good guard, especially with his hand usage being as good as it is. So someone to keep an eye on for sure. I thought they got really good value with him in the 4th. But then we're right back 2 picks later to one of my least favorite picks in the entire draft, Jordan Jefferson out of LSU. Like, did they only watch LSU's tape this year? They took 3 of these guys. I really wouldn't have drafted this player. I wouldn't have. I think his tape was really poor. He's a high effort, high energy guy. There were plays against the run where you see a little bit of it. But a borderline useless pass rusher, has no pass rushing tool belt at all, doesn't rush with power. I don't think he can be on the field on 3rd down at all. And his run defense certainly wasn't good enough to take him in the 4th round to be like an impact run defender. He's also the guy at the Senior Bowl that was getting worked all week by, adequate prospects on the interior of the offensive line. Was getting just destroyed for the first 2 days of the draft. At the end of the second practice, gets pissed off, rips off Christian Haynes' helmet. And you can't do that at the Senior Bowl in front of all of those teams. This to me was a vintage Trent Baalke whiff, in my opinion. They traded out of last year's draft with the Saints to get this pick. So it just completely wastes, whatever good process they had last year. That's kind of why I was laughing at the Brian Thomas trade down. It's like, great, they traded down so they can make another Jordan Jefferson pick next week. Really hope I'm wrong. Just telling you what I saw when I watched him. For me, it was like, okay, if we're at the end of the 7th round and there's been a run of defensive tackles and we need someone that's going to come in and compete for a back end of the roster spot to maybe play some run defense for us, we'll take Jordan Jefferson if we're comfortable with his temper issues. 4th round is absurd to me. Better prospects at this position, other positions. And in the 4th round, I'm willing to be more critical of these picks. If this was a 6th or 7th round pick, it's like, okay, whatever. But these are real valuable positions. I mean, 2 spots ahead of that, they got a potential starting tackle, in my opinion, in Javon Foster. So hate that pick. Then they go Deontay Prince in the 5th round. I did think there was other guys I liked better, but not enough to like bang the drum for it like I am with the Jordan Jefferson pick. If you wanted that, kind of freaky developmental SEC corner, I would have gone with Marcellus Dial out of South Carolina. Thought his tape was much better. Or if you're going to gamble, at least go with a guy who's good at football in Kalen Carson, who I don't really know why he fell. I think that was injury related, but I'd rather take that gamble. Or just, don't waste a pick on Jordan Jefferson in the 4th round and go with a TJ Tampa, DJ James, Jarvis Brownlee, Chris Abrams-Drain, Cam Hart. Bunch of good corners went after they took Jordan Jefferson and before they took Deontay Prince. And that corner room, like we talked about with Jones, huge need and a very underwhelming haul for me with the players they got. But that criticism is more reflected with the Jordan Jefferson reach. The Prince pick, again, fine enough, middle of the 5th round. He certainly fits that developmental athlete, SEC type, play special teams, see if he grows type of guy. Keelan Robinson out of Texas in the 5th round was really jaw-dropping to me. I just didn't see it with him. He's an undersized, true scat back. Like, give me a Blake Watson here. Dylan Laub, who went about 15 picks later. Jaden Sheridan, Michael Wiley, so many other players that could have given you this role. But the other question is, like, did you need this role? Are you planning on moving on from Travis Etienne? Because one of the better things he does is the receiving game. So are you planning on taking Etienne off the field for Keelan Robinson? I just don't get it. I actually don't like their backup running backs, really. I mean, they have the older kid guy from Cleveland, I guess. But Kamani Vidal goes a few picks later. Kendall Milton, Frank Gore Jr., Dylan Johnson out of Washington, just so many other better running backs to me than Keelan Robinson. And I don't understand the fit either, schematically speaking. So really weird pick to me. Okay, kicker in the 6th round, it's fine. Miles Cole, again, like, am I going to be critical of this as a 7th round pick? No, it's about where I had him going, but just laughable at this point that Trent Baalke sees a certifiably useless edge rusher. Like, literally, his tape was horrid at Texas Tech. You're watching this dude who has freaky traits, 100th percentile arm length, nearly 37 inches, which Trent Baalke, something else got a little long when he saw that measured in at the combine. But, dude, he's horrible. And he's a 6-year player, has not figured it out yet. I understand why not in the 7th round. That's why I'm giving it a solid pick. But it is funny, like, that it is the Jacksonville Jaguars. We're seemingly the only team willing to draft the guy because there was about 20 picks left before he got drafted. Seriously laughable tape. It's like, dude, you just are playing the wrong sport. You just are. Like, you should maybe have been a volleyball player or something else because you just clearly don't get football. Like, it sounds lazy to say that, but just go get a Caddy's Cut Up subscription, load up a Miles Cole tape, and you'll see what I'm saying. It's pretty funny. Like, bad pad level, no pass rush moves, missing tackles, incredibly stiff. It's pretty crazy. Anyway, for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm going with a C, entirely bailed out, in my opinion, by smashing the 1st round. Love the Brian Thomas Jr. pick, but I'm pretty convinced that they didn't get anything else out of this draft other than a good swing tackle who on this team, it's going to be hard for him to ever become a starter because they've got a bunch of other adequate pieces at tackle ahead of him. But man, I hope I'm wrong. To this point, I haven't really been wrong about my criticisms on Trent Baalke, so we'll see where that one goes. Again, a C grade. I didn't mention I like the Josh Proctor pickup as an undrafted free agent. I saw a useful safety, good tape, just not a great athlete. I think he makes the team for the Jags. But let's wrap up with the Tennessee Titans, kind of the reverse of what we just did with the Jags, where I hate what they did early and then kind of like the rest of their draft. So the J.C. Latham pick with the 7th pick. Now, this is another one of those players where I'm kind of on an island, where he was one of my least favorite kind of hype guys in this draft. I knew he was going to go early. Didn't know he was going to go this early. But I just don't see him as a starting tackle in the NFL. I think his foot speed is entirely abysmal. I think that he skipped the workouts for a reason. I just don't think he's a good athlete. He's huge. He's got great length. I see that. Now, the main reason this is a D and not an F is I am like the rest of you Titans fans. I see that pick from Bill Callahan, who has forgotten more about offensive line play than I'll ever know. I fully recognize that. But I'm not going to just completely chicken out of what I felt like was a pretty strong opinion that I believe in based on the tape that I watched on him. I don't see it. I think his foot speed is going to be a massive problem at the next level. And if that's something that Bill Callahan's like, I can fix this, that's his, he's in the right to have that opinion as one of the highest paid offensive line coaches in the league. But I think it's a physical deficiency. I don't think it's a technical deficiency on J.C. Latham. So you've got that. So many things I don't like about this pick. They're moving him to left tackle, so you're flipping his position. For me, it's like, dude, hello, Olu Fashanu. What do we not like about Olu Fashanu is the fact that you don't have to coach him. Bill Callahan, like, you saw Olu and you're like, oh, I don't really have anything left to teach him. I don't want him. Like, that's an NFL, that happens in the NFL where it's like, oh, that guy's maxed out. I don't want him. It's like, okay, but the other guy needs to be maxed out, and then is it even going to be as good as the other dude? So that was weird to me. Or another guy like Troy Fontenot, I think would be a much better player for them. But again, he's too technically refined. We can't take that guy. Then the fact that they stayed put at 7 and took him, they needed a lot of draft picks. They so easily could have navigated out of this situation. Apparently, there were teams that wanted Michael Penix. I think teams would have moved up for Roma Dunze to jump the Bears. They seemingly loved J.C. Latham, wanted to stay put here at 7. I'm pretty critical of that. I'll also reiterate the point that I watched his tape, wanted to see a much more dominant run blocker than what we got. I thought there was a lot of kind of the NFL trope of looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. Kind of saw that with J.C. Latham. I thought he was a little bit soft as a run blocker. He's got good sustain. He's got length and good technique. He's not a bad run blocker. But if you're drafting him at 7, it's like, I need that run block tape to be effing dominant with how low of a floor I think he has as a pass protecting left tackle for your young quarterback that you're trying to give help here. Again, this is a D and not an F because Bill Callahan liked this guy. Titans fans, I acknowledge that point, and I am so ready to be wrong that he just saw something I didn't, right? I get it, but this is my opinion. I thought this was a massive reach, a massive, I hate to use the word waste, but misutilization of what could have turned into a haul of picks to move down and still get, in my opinion, even better tackle prospects, let alone, like, you don't know if J.C. Latham was going to go at 7. It sounds like the NFL liked him a lot, but I feel like the Jets were pretty locked in on Fashanu. I don't know, man. I'm curious to see where this goes. I am very strongly opposed to this pick for the Titans. Then they take T'Vondre Sweat, basically where I had him going before the DUI. So, like, this would have been an A grade for me, but with those off-field issues becoming really brought to the forefront here, I think this is a little bit early for me. Now, he's a unique player to grade, right? Like, if they still think... And this is, you're bringing him into Nashville. That's a tough thing, right? Like, if this is a guy that likes to party, likes his weed, likes to drink, likes to eat. Look, I've been to Nashville. It's a fucking blast. I love Nashville. I think T'Vondre Sweat might like Nashville too, so it's a little risky. And they've had issues with these types of guys that aren't as focused on football. I'll just say that. So it's interesting. I love the upside. I think he brings something that nobody in this draft could offer, a legitimate potential 3-down nose tackle. The potential of him with Jeffrey Simmons, who's best off as a 3-tech, is phenomenal. I understand what they like about him for their front. I do. But a lot of times we just write off-field issues and celebrate how good the football player is when you look back on it, and it is pretty 50-50. So it's a risky pick. I understand it. I'm going to go the B on that one for Sweat. Now, I think they had one of the best day 3s of the draft in the league. I like to love all of these picks, starting with Cedric Gray at the top of the 4th round. He was my number 4 linebacker in this draft. I thought outside of Junior Colson, he was the next guy you want if you actually want someone that can come in and compete for your roster right away as a starting linebacker. Very balanced profile, easy mover, good zone feel, just great value in my opinion in a not just a class, but really a modern framework of the NFL where there's just not a lot of good linebacker prospects. I thought he was a good linebacker prospect, right? To get in the 4th round, love it. Like the fact that teams like Dallas and Green Bay took Hopper and Luafau ahead of him, it does not make sense to me. Then you go Jarvis Brownlee, 5th round. Love that. I had a late 3rd, early 4th round grade on him. Super high IQ, playmaking corner. You're bringing in that Ravens defensive scheme here in Tennessee, which is a lot of zone. I like that for Jarvis Brownlee. With his eyes on the quarterback, he's got a great first step. Physical, kind of the right, like an aesthetically pleasing corner where he's a risk taker. He's going to make plays. Probably never going to be a shutdown number 1 guy, right? It's not controversial to say for our 5th round pick, but I think he could get in the mix in this secondary, especially when you have a L'Jarius Sneed in there now, who is that shutdown dude. So I'm very curious, like a little bit of like Deron Bland, 5th round pick, great playmaking instincts, going to give up some plays as well, but you put Bland opposite of L'Jarius Sneed, you're in business. If Chidobe Awuzie goes down, injury questions there, he might be the next guy in, and he might not look back. So he's a really nice pick there, in my opinion. Was running routes for guys at the Senior Bowl with his anticipation. Then you go Jaquan Jackson, wide receiver out of Tulane. Really good value here. I see a potential starting slot wide receiver in the league. I thought a lot of worse wide receivers went ahead of him. Good route runner, good hands, looked really good at the Senior Bowl. I liked his tape. So yeah, I thought that was a great pick. Potential starter. They have Treylon Burks. If he gets hurt again, they're going to need that slot type to step in. I think Jackson in an abysmal wide receiver room is a really nice pick for them. James Williams, end of the 7th round. It's about where I thought he would go. I'm not going to go great pick on this, but definitely a good pick. Like someone to keep an eye on as a potential starting linebacker down the road. Played safety at Miami. Actually had pretty good anticipation and ball skills, but just, you can tell he's a linebacker, not a safety. He put on weight. He ran, I think, 4.6s, but he's got, great length, 33.5-inch arms. I don't think there's a ton to teach him in terms of zone IQ. Like playing safety is going to translate there. It's just a matter of how well does the all new run defense training translate for him at a new body profile, new position. It's going to take a while, but he's 21 years old. Like he's a young linebacker convert. Definitely one of my favorite kind of day 3 linebacker projects. And should play special teams well for you while he grows. And then Jalen Harrell's a nice edge depth piece to take at the end of the 7th round. I thought he got a little bit overhyped in the process, but at this point, he's a useful player. I think if you want to use stand-up edge players in your system, he's a good coverage dropper, a good run defender. I was really underwhelmed by his pass rushing ability, but I don't think you're drafting him to really do that for you. So good pick at the very end of the 7th round. In terms of UDFAs, no one really caught my eye there for the Titans, but at the end of the day, I'm going to go with a C+ on this draft. It just got incrementally better for me after the Latham pick, but obviously that's one I'm going to look back on and be like, I certainly didn't see it. I'm happy to be wrong. I'm a big Will Levis guy. I really hope J.C. Latham is this awesome left tackle that Bill Callahan saw. Trust me, I want to be wrong about this one, Titans fans, but I'm also going to tell you my opinion. And I really thought they botched it. So there you go. There's your AFC South. We have our Western divisions left. That is it. Whoever I see more of in the comments saying NFC West or AFC West next, you're up. So I will be checking. I'll be looking out for you. Please do hit that like button while you're down there. And we'll see you as soon as possible for the next one. I got a couple of weekend events here that might slow us down till Sunday. So we'll see. I'm gonna try my best to get another one up tomorrow, but no promises. Until the next one, though, enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you later. Peace out.